Greer Wexley sat across from me in my glass office like she owned the air, tapping her nails on my desk calendar and saying, flat as concrete, "Cut your whole unit by Friday or I'll do it for you." Not a pause, not a blink, like she was ordering toner. I'm Dane Mercer. I was 58 back then, running a small crew inside Monroe & Rowe Manufacturing called the Strategic Integrity Unit. 8 people, all sharp as razors. We weren't fancy, we just kept the lab consumables lines from crashing when the cracks showed up. I didn't sugarcoat it. I leaned back and told her, "Your idea of efficiency is going to gut this place, and I'm not the guy who swings the axe so you can stay clean." She smiled like I'd just told her a bedtime story. "They cost too much. They don't belong on the org chart. HR is ready. Security's ready." Then she gave me the threat, like dessert. "If you won't do it, I'll have them walked out." Through the glass, I watched my people work like it was any other Tuesday. Merritt Shaw buried in defect reports. Tobin Cruz elbow deep in a quality room adjustment. Darby Lane handling a cranky client like a pro. Della Hart running calendars like she had 3 brains. RJ Patel in his corner with a compliance tracker open like a field manual. Orson Vale marking packaging specs by hand. Quiet work that stops audits before they start. Keaton Briggs was out in the field, and Stellan Pike was upstairs with validation protocols. When Greer left, I opened my drawer and thumbed through a stack of thank you cards. They'd given those to me after we saved a huge account last year. I'm not the sentimental type, but those cards reminded me. These weren't just headcount. They were the reason product still shipped. I didn't waste time. No dinner meeting, no agenda email. Just one message. Back entrance, rooftop parking, 7:10. They showed up, one by one. Shoulders tight, eyes scanning mine before saying a word. I gave it to them straight. "Greer wants you gone by Friday. No warning, no handoff, just gone." Nobody panicked. I saw the shock hit, then the anger behind it, and finally that quiet, laser-sharp look we all get when it's go time. Later that night, I walked through the front door, and Noemi was already pouring coffee. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't say to stay calm. She just said, "If she's trying to make you her weapon, don't be. But don't let pride make you reckless either." I didn't answer her. I stood up, grabbed my keys again, and walked back to the office. Quick note. Before listening, share which city or country you're watching from. And let's continue. I walked back into the office that night and sat in the dark, door closed, watching the monitors flick blue across the glass. Security lights buzzed overhead. Everything looked clean, quiet, under control. That was the trick of it. Monroe & Rowe doesn't make anything sexy. No gadgets, no tech miracles. Just sterile kits, test tube assemblies, lab packaging. Stuff that has to be exact, or people bleed money and maybe more. Hospitals trust that when they rip open our seal, it works. When it doesn't, phones light up. Inspectors show up. Lawsuits knock. 4 years back, we were on that edge. 2 major distributors cut reorder volumes. A cheaper competitor pushed in hard. And our defect rate, nothing huge, just a little uptick, was enough to shake trust. The execs circled up. Charts, meetings, panic dressed as planning. On the floor, people went quiet. It felt like waiting for a hammer to fall. I wasn't the guy people bet on for a fix. No Ivy League diploma, no golf game. I was just operations. A factory rat who'd outlasted 3 product cycles and 10 buzzword campaigns. But I knew where rot lives. It's never flashy. It's in the cracks. Handoffs that skip steps. Logs nobody checks. Jobs labeled, "Not my problem." So I made one offer to Lyle Hargrove, our CEO. "Give me 8 people. Let us run quiet. No press release, no ladder climbing. Just 6 months to fix what matters." He squinted like I'd asked for a helicopter. Then he said, "You fail, you're gone with them." I said, "Fair." I didn't hire resume polishers. I pulled in people who were too smart to chase politics and too stubborn to leave a mess unsolved. Merritt Shaw could read a defect report and tell you which shift screwed up based on the angle of the machine drift. I once watched her predict a seal failure by smell. Orson Vale barely spoke in meetings, but give him a packaging flaw, and he'd silently rebuild the entire spec in a way that made auditors lean back and nod. Darby Lane was the best client face we had. Calm, alert, cut through noise. She could get a furious buyer to delay cancellation just long enough for the real fix to land. RJ Patel? Compliance wizard. Guy kept so many receipts I'm surprised he didn't have paper burn scars. Titles didn't scare him, only lies did. Tobin Cruz came from a tool shop. He didn't recommend adjustments, he made them. He'd fix a jig at the root instead of blaming an operator. Della Hart ran the scheduling jungle. She didn't just remember people, she remembered what made them fold under pressure, and she never used it to win points. Keaton Briggs knew the truth from the field. What parts cracked, what labels peeled, what the end users cursed when reps weren't around. And Stellan Pike, our eighth, was the guy who could read a validation report like other people read a bedtime story. If a protocol had a crack in it, he'd spot it before the ink dried. We worked out of a retrofitted quality room next to the freight dock. No windows, low ceiling. No one visited unless something was on fire. That was fine by us. We didn't present slides, we didn't lobby, we fixed. Then we handed the clean version to the official teams and walked away before anyone could dress it up for credit. That's why people like Greer didn't know we existed. On paper, we were shadows. But the board knew something. Over time, a few of them started asking for favors. Not the crooked kind, the real kind. Merritt helped with a scholarship metrics program. Tobin did a last-minute walkthrough when an investor asked for unfiltered reality. RJ caught a compliance form that would have become a six-figure penalty if it went live. We didn't do favors to network. We did it because we knew the cost of silence. So when Greer first walked in, fresh out of some optimization seminar with her buttoned-up smirk, she didn't see any of that. She saw extra payroll and unclear roles. People like her always do. They think clean charts mean clean systems. But the thing about fire breaks is, if you don't know they're there, you cut them first. And when the flames hit, there's nothing left to slow it down. The rooftop crew didn't blink when I laid it out. Merritt nodded first. RJ was already writing something in the notes app on his phone before I finished talking. Nobody panicked. Nobody played martyr. I said, "We're going to look like we're losing." Tobin frowned. "You want them to think we're quitting?" "Exactly. Greer's the kind that loosens her grip when she thinks the fight's over. We give her that space." So we made it look clean. We boxed things slowly, made careful folder transfers like we were prepping for handoff. Every goodbye file had just enough polish to pass, but not enough to carry weight. In the back end, we were quietly tagging gaps. Who handled what, which checks failed without cross-verification, what broke downstream when invisible hands got cut. Security walked by twice. Greer walked by once. She stopped at my office door like she'd just smelled fresh paint and said, "I appreciate your professionalism, Dane. This kind of maturity is rare." I looked at her and said nothing. She tapped the door frame like she was marking territory. HR will conduct final meetings Friday afternoon. Security will retrieve badges. Please inform your team. She said it like she was inviting us to a brunch. Thursday night, I sat in the plant's north stairwell, concrete cold under me, phone to my ear. Lyle picked up. "I'm not calling for permission," I told him. "I'm calling because if she cuts us, Monday's going to bleed, and I don't want her getting out in front of it." He didn't interrupt, just let silence stretch. Finally, he said, "You're that sure?" "Yes, and you will be too, by noon Monday. But you have to let it fall apart first. One day. That's all I need." Another pause. "If I give you that, and you're wrong, I'm not." He sighed, slow and flat. "Then don't flinch. because I won't be able to protect you mid-collapse. I'm not asking for protection, just daylight. Friday had that smell, HR perfume and printed paper guilt, bright folders, too much nodding. Della walked in first. They told her she was no longer aligned with strategic priorities. She smiled like someone watching a bad actor forget his lines. Tobin was next. He didn't say a word until the end, then just one line. "You're going to need a real mechanic in 2 weeks." Darby asked, "Who's taking my client load Monday morning?" They didn't have an answer. She gave them a dry nod and stood. One by one, they came out badgeless. System access vanished like clockwork. By 4:30, the card readers stopped recognizing them. Greer sent me a message. Clean execution. Like we were nothing but a checklist she got to cross off. I stayed late, walking the empty quality room we used as home base. Each corner still held our fingerprints, whiteboards, taped specs, the crooked outlet RJ always cursed. I didn't touch anything. I didn't want it to feel like a funeral. At 4:20, I sent the text. Blue protocol, no improvising. The replies came in less than 2 minutes. Same word every time. Copy. And just like that, the quiet part was done. Monday morning, the first call came at 8:22. Shipping supervisor, tight voice. "We've got 4 pallets ready, but the quality sign-off chain's frozen. Nothing's moving until it clears." 10 minutes later, production chimed in. Line 5 was down. Tooling log didn't match the last inspection summary. They couldn't run without confirmation, and the person who normally handled the correction walked out Friday. By 9:05, the dam broke. Customer service got slammed. One of our bigger hospital distributors flagged their order as pending review and demanded to know why. A regional buyer who'd signed a 7-month contract threatened to escalate unless someone explained why their priority delivery had vanished from the system. I watched the panic move like weather, people checking folders that didn't have what they expected, clicking dashboards that suddenly had red instead of green. It wasn't fire, it was confusion with consequences. That's when it became obvious. My unit hadn't been doing the whole job, but we'd been the glue. The part that caught silent mistakes, filled the gaps nobody documented, and made sure nothing embarrassing ever got far enough to echo. Greer's reaction came at 9:40. I heard her before I saw her, telling a nearby manager, "This is the fallout from legacy inefficiency, unlabeled dependencies, poor documentation hygiene." Then louder, "This is why unofficial teams are dangerous. You can't track what they break until it breaks." She said it like she was diagnosing a corpse she killed. At 10:18, Lyle's assistant pulled me into a side corridor. She didn't waste words. 2 board members already called. One about a missed shipment. The other said compliance review had to be rescheduled because the packet wasn't there. That was faster than I expected. I nodded once and said, "Tell Lyle I've got eyes on everything, but not yet." 10 minutes after that, Greer called a floor meeting. Spontaneous. Rushed. She stood in front of the operations cluster like a war general giving a status report. "This isn't sabotage," she said, "but it is the cost of poor system design. Dane's team built heroics, not sustainability. What you're seeing now are legacy dependencies unraveling." I didn't wait for her to finish. I stepped forward, calm and clear. "No. What you're seeing now is your version of optimization. You fired the people who held the handoffs together." I wasn't yelling, but I didn't lower my voice for her comfort either. Greer turned to face me, let her expression soften just enough to seem wounded, and said, "I don't appreciate being intimidated in front of staff." 2 managers flinched. One of them was Gordon Sloan, newer board member, reputation for valuing tone more than substance. He murmured something about appropriate channels, and I watched the opening form in Greer's mind. That was her lever. That one hesitation. By 10:53, the board had asked for a formal explanation. They wanted to know why 3 high-priority checks failed at once. Lyle called for an emergency review at midday. I didn't need to ask who'd try to speak first. Greer would come in calm, polished, pretending this was all just an unfortunate event, a temporary system hiccup that proved her point. I sent one message to the unit. Hold. Don't rescue yet. Letting it fall wasn't natural. Everything in me wanted to jump in, fix, cover, clarify. But that was the old playbook. This time, they needed to feel the damage before they believed there was intent. At 12:07 sharp, we walked into the main conference room like we belonged there. I took the end seat closest to the whiteboard. Thaddeus Rourke was already at the head of the table, arms folded, stone-faced. Blythe Calder sat near the middle, notebook closed, watching Greer like she'd been waiting all morning to catch her blinking. Hollis Crane looked like he couldn't be bothered, feet planted wide, leaning back, bored on purpose. Greer stood at the front, next to the projection screen, slides queued up like she was about to pitch a recovery plan to the board. Light gray suit, perfect posture, fake calm. Then the side door opened. My unit walked in. One by one. Merritt first, Tobin and Della close behind. RJ, Stellan, Darby, Orson, Keaton, back on the floor like nothing had ever happened. Greer froze mid-breath, remote in hand, eyes doing the math before she could fake surprise. She hadn't expected the reception. Thaddeus got up and shook Tobin's hand like an old friend. Blythe stood to greet Merritt and asked about a community program she'd quietly funded last spring. RJ and Hollis exchanged dry jabs like ex-roommates bumping into each other at a bar. Greer's smile got tighter, like it was cutting her face. Lyle walked in last, not smiling. He went straight to the head of the table and said, "Before we discuss today's operational disruptions, we need to revisit Friday's terminations." Greer straightened, palms flat on the table. I eliminated an unnecessary cost center. The structure was inefficient and undocumented. Hollis let out a dry laugh through his nose. Didn't say a word, just shook his head like he'd heard a bad cover band butcher a classic. Thaddeus didn't laugh. He just looked at Greer and said, "Did you speak with the heads of the business units these individuals supported?" She lifted her chin. "I reviewed expense data and role overlap. The functions were redundant." Blythe tilted her head. "Redundant with what?" Greer said, "Their activities weren't aligned to department KPIs. It was legacy load." I stood up. What we did, what we still do, is prevent things from snowballing. We handle the threads that don't fit cleanly on flowcharts. Client retention, compliance stitching, real-time escalation, quiet saves no one sees until they stop happening. Greer cut in. "Those contributions weren't labeled. If impact can't be tracked, it can't be justified." Merritt spoke, calm but sharp. "That's the point. We fix and hand it off. No spotlight. The company looks smooth. That's our win." Gordon Sloan leaned forward. "Dane, I understand you're passionate, but your tone is aggressive. This is a professional setting." And right there, Greer jumped. Tilted her shoulders, lowered her voice. "I've been spoken to with hostility. I don't feel safe escalating concerns when there's aggression in the room." I didn't give her the scene she wanted. I stayed standing, met Gordon's eyes, and said, "You want calm? Fine. Let's be clear. I didn't raise my voice at her. I raised it at a decision that's burning down process stability, and I have the receipts." I connected my laptop and projected a short email thread. I had sent Greer detailed updates on the unit's activities, client impacts, compliance saves, cost avoidance. Her replies? Noted. Will review. Not core to roadmap. Blythe didn't blink. Hollis leaned forward. I said, "We weren't invisible. We were ignored." The room shifted. Thaddeus tapped his pen once, then looked at Greer. "Efficiency without understanding is vandalism." Greer inhaled through her nose, long and slow. "To avoid future confusion, I'd like full access to the Winton launch materials, for review." Lyle answered before I could. "Approved. RJ will assist with controlled access." RJ nodded once, neutral as a courtroom stenographer. Greer smiled like she'd still won something. She had no idea what she'd just walked into. Greer smiled like nothing had cracked. After the boardroom, she started playing a different role. Softer voice, slower speech, hands folded politely in meetings like she was waiting her turn in a waiting room. But under the surface, the game sharpened. She stopped pushing directly and started probing sideways. One person at a time, she asked little things. Who signs off on tooling adjustments? Who usually approves vendors for expedited cycles? Where does the full Winton certification packet live? Winton wasn't just a product. It was a sterile kit line tied to a full compliance bundle. Test results, packaging validation, supplier letters, traceable documentation that had to survive audit. If one line in that packet got muddy, buyers would stall, and regulators would circle like hawks. RJ sat in her office for 3 days. On paper, he was assisting with access. In practice, he was watching her try to reverse engineer the whole launch pipeline. When I asked how it went, he said, "She's not looking for clarity, she's hunting for levers." She asked about emergency procurement rules and who controls the exception list. That's not cost-cutting, that's groundwork. Merritt came to me midweek with something else. "We've got drift," she said, showing me internal test records with numbers that didn't match shift logs. A few signatures looked copied, not scanned. She didn't point fingers yet. She just started building a side file. That's her style. Quiet, verified, methodical. Orson flagged 2 packaging spec edits that made no sense at all. One phrasing tweak could shift classification codes. The other one added ambiguity that would force a retest if an external inspector read it too literally. Then Tobin noticed something uglier. A tooling maintenance log with a single-digit error that changed the timing window. Not enough to shut a line down, just enough to cause a problem that looks like operator error later. I didn't see Greer doing any of it directly, but security logs don't lie. She'd told people she was traveling Tuesday and Thursday. Badge data showed her on site both nights, past 11. IT flagged 3 after-hours accesses to the compliance drive we'd partitioned for Winton. Later, internal audit confirmed it. That's not forgetfulness, that's precision. And while she worked the system, she started poisoning the people. HR called me, said they'd received a concern that I might be hostile to female leadership. 2 days later, Noemi said someone from another school asked if I had anger management history. She didn't even bother hiding it. That was her shield. If the hammer came down, she'd already be wearing her exit narrative. I brought the team together. "We're not chasing rumors," I told them. "We're collecting facts. That's the only defense we need." Keaton, calling in from the field, said one of our clients mentioned Winton delays as something they heard might happen. That's when I knew. She wasn't just working the inside. She was prepping the outside, spreading smoke before she even lit the fire. Lyle was ready to pull the plug, hard, but Blythe cut in with one sentence. "If she's steering this, let her keep going until she runs out of room." Cold, but right. We doubled our backups, sealed the real packet, and made one rule stick. No Winton document moved without a second set of eyes. Not one. If Greer wanted a crisis, she was going to have to manufacture every inch of it. We met in Tobin's garage after 10. Folding chairs, cold air, tools on the wall in perfect lines. It smelled like oil, dust, and the kind of coffee that makes your throat regret existing. No buzzwords, no titles, just truth. RJ kicked us off. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. Greer asked for an emergency vendor pathway memo. Same phrasing I saw when I was adjacent to an audit at Carrick Pharma. That audit tanked a mid-launch. He didn't need to explain the rest. We all knew what he was saying. This wasn't her first rodeo. Stellan opened his laptop, turned it so we could see. I pulled the most recent procurement drafts. The language changed last week. Credential requirements tightened, very specific ones. Lead time narrowed to an unreasonable window. And there's a phrase in there that's almost word for word from a vendor I flagged once before. He hit one key. Vanguard Compliance Group. I recognized the name. Not because they were the best, because they were the ones that show up when someone needs a mess cleaned fast and quiet, at triple cost. Keaton let out a slow breath. Heard them mentioned twice in the field, not positive connections. One rep said Vanguard came in after a product line mysteriously derailed. Fees were crazy. Contract got rushed through legal under the emergency clause. It tracked. Too well. RJ added, "They weren't our top pick. They weren't even second. But this new language? Only they fit. And it didn't come from purchasing. It came from Greer's side." I didn't say anything for a second. The only sound was a slow drip near the garage sink. Then Merritt spoke. "Hollis Crane. Anyone else think his tone changed at the last meeting?" Stellan nodded. Felt like he was running cover for her. Subtle, but enough to slow things down. Merritt opened her own file. He used to hold a small stake in a parent company tied to Vanguard. Disclosure from 8 years ago. I found it through archived board filings. That stopped the room. For the next hour, we talked it through like a jury. Was he compromised? Was he backing her for more than optics? Or just scared of what would happen if anyone started digging into his old ties? I hated how plausible it felt. I also hated how quick we were to believe it. The next morning, I walked into Hollis's office. Just me. No files, no witnesses. He looked up, surprised. "Is this about Greer?" I said, "It's about Vanguard, and your old stake in their umbrella." He didn't flinch. He held eye contact like it cost him. "I sold that stake long before Greer's first major role. I haven't touched anything related to them in years. But if this story gets public, I know how it'll read." I nodded once. "Then you're not protecting her. You're protecting your own name." "You're right. I am." And that's when I knew. He wasn't in the scheme. He just hated scandal more than he loved truth. That mattered. Because it told me Greer didn't need a co-conspirator. She just needed a room full of people too careful to say no. That night, RJ and I stayed late. Coffee, files, log reports. We had the language changes. We had access anomalies. We had Greer's fingerprints all over the setup. What we still didn't have was the one piece of proof that ended the argument. The kind of proof that doesn't just survive a boardroom, it survives lawyers. And we knew exactly how to bait it. I walked into Greer's office the next morning with the right kind of slump in my shoulders. Not defeated, cornered. I didn't sit. I didn't play the power dance. I kept my voice level and gave her the opening she'd been itching for. "We've got a possible snag in the Winton packet," I said. "One of the cert summaries might not align if an inspector reads it literally. If we're lucky, it's nothing. If not, we slip the launch." She didn't blink. Just gave me that half-breath pause like she was weighing something. Her eyes did the spark thing, fake concern, real opportunity. "What kind of support would help?" she asked. "External," I said, like it burned my throat. "Somebody who can stabilize the documentation fast. Someone with launch experience under tight deadlines." I didn't say Vanguard. She needed to offer it. She nodded slowly, like she was unlocking a drawer she'd already opened 10 times. "I may have recommendations," she said, then added, syrup smooth, "Don't let your team's pride ruin this opportunity, Dane." Back at the war room, I shut the door and laid it out. We're going to give her a window, and we're going to catch her in it. We built 2 versions of the Winton packet. One was real, locked down, sealed, validated under multi-step clearance. The other was a decoy with just enough imperfections to draw blood. Missing test references, a draft presentation with nervous language, graphics that looked slapped together. Della coordinated with building security and legal. No drama, no headlines. Just quiet approvals, written clearance, and a heads up to facilities. "We're not bugging her office," I told them. We're just going to let her write the story in her own handwriting. Merritt set a backup trigger on the decoy folder, automatic snapshot, and restore if anything got changed or erased. Orson embedded a watermark in the decoy visuals. Subtle, not obvious. Just enough to prove the file had been opened and modified. The bait was down. Greer bit fast. Security pulled badge logs and entry cam footage for us 2 days later. She'd accessed the building after 11 p.m., 3 nights in a row. Claimed to be out of town. Showed up on camera walking in through the north side, head down, laptop bag clutched like a trophy. I didn't watch it live. I reviewed it with RJ the next morning, slow, timestamp by timestamp. The near miss came on night 4. Merritt called me at 1:18 a.m. Her voice wasn't panicked, just clipped. She tried to delete the test summaries subfolder. Trigger fired. Restore held. But for a second, it looked gone. I felt it in my chest, tight and hard, like I'd been hit. "You sure we're clean?" "We're clean," she said. "And now we've got it." She didn't just access. She tried to erase. That crossed the line. By 8 the next morning, Greer was pushing for an emergency board session. She called it time-sensitive, offered to handle vendor outreach personally. RJ walked past my door with a coffee and said flat, "She's moving to close." I didn't look up. I just said, "Then we ended at the table." The room was already full when I walked in. Greer sat at the head with printed binders in front of her, each one angled just so, like props for a perfect show. Her blazer matched the tabs, cool gray, sharp lines. Lyle looked worn out, shoulders sagged, eyes dark. Thaddeus Rourke stared at Greer like a man who'd already done the math and didn't like the total. Blythe Calder leaned forward, hands clasped like a trap waiting to spring. I took my spot, RJ next to me, Merritt across. We didn't say a word. Greer started with calm control. Her voice was careful, modulated, lawyer-ready. "We've uncovered multiple inconsistencies in the Winton certification documentation. Testing gaps, signature irregularities, formatting errors. There is serious risk to launch integrity." She didn't look at me once. Then she slid a binder to the center. "I've identified a vendor who can stabilize the packet. Vanguard Compliance Group. They've worked on accelerated timelines before." She let the number land last. 2,850,000 in expedite support. The silence had weight. Gordon Sloan leaned forward, eyes on me. "Dane, what safeguards were in place to prevent these issues? Was there a breakdown in process discipline?" Greer turned her head slightly, softening her tone just enough to perform it. "Let's keep this civil, Dane. This isn't personal." I stood, didn't raise my voice, just said, "We can talk about tone later. Right now, we're talking evidence." I opened my laptop and walked them through the real Winton packet, live. Test summaries clean, audit logs intact, signature chains aligned, supplier guarantees in place, time-stamped, verified. No drama, no holes, just steady, certifiable work. Greer's hand twitched near her binder. "That's impossible," she snapped. I didn't blink. "Only if you believe the version you tampered with was real." RJ and Merritt stood and laid down 2 binders, side-by-side document comparisons, badge entry logs, time-stamped file edits. I clicked the security footage. Greer entering the building late at night. Footage of her logging into a terminal. A capture of her cursor inside the decoy folder, editing test numbers, injecting vague phrasing into compliance lines, rewriting tender language. "I didn't witness it live," I said, "but this is what IT and audit pulled afterward, all within approved retention protocols." Then came the clincher. RJ opened the final binder. Phone logs. Greer's personal number calling Vanguard during business hours. Email chains she'd tried to delete, pulled from compliance archives. Blythe didn't speak. Her eyes just narrowed. That was the sound of a door locking. Greer's composure cracked. "You set me up," she said, rising fast. You think you can trap me with fake files and staged footage? She lunged toward the laptop. Security moved. Thaddeus stood. Sit down. She didn't. He looked at security. Remove her from the room. As they moved, Hollis finally spoke, his voice sharp but aimed at himself. I stayed quiet to protect my name. That was cowardice. But this is over. That shifted everything. When the vote came, it was fast. Greer, suspended immediately. Vendor agreements frozen. A formal investigation opened by outside counsel. Gordon didn't say a word, just stared at the evidence like it had betrayed him personally. He didn't apologize, but he didn't look away. 3 days later, Lyle called me into his office and closed the door. He didn't do small talk. He just said, "The board wants your unit formalized. Full visibility, direct line to executive leadership. You'll have budget protection and process authority." I didn't smile. I nodded once. Relief's not something I perform for people. RJ gave us the legal rundown in our old conference corner. He was matter of fact. Greer's access frozen, devices secured, external counsel looped in. 2 of her prior companies had already agreed to cooperate after seeing the timeline we presented. That told me this wasn't ending with one headline. Later that day, Gordon Sloan asked if I had a minute. No aides, no audience, just him. He looked different, like someone who'd finally stopped trying to win an argument and started listening. He said, "I let tone distract me. It felt safer than conflict." Then he added, plain and quiet, "I'm sorry." I told him, "I don't forget, but I respect people who show up after the fact." He nodded, and that was the whole exchange. Greer tried one last play. HR contacted me about a formal complaint, said I'd created a hostile environment. Legal reviewed the evidence, transcripts, access logs, all of it. The complaint got shut down so fast it didn't even ripple. Noemi heard through the school circuit that the rumor machine had gone dead. That night, I slept like a man who finally handed off the last shift. We came in the next morning and worked like none of it had happened. Merritt rewired the defect dashboards. Orson tightened packaging instructions and cleared a review backlog. Darby made calls that turned doubt into confidence. Keaton handled field questions before they reached legal. Tobin rebalanced tooling schedules. Stellan cleaned the cert packet one last time, and Della made sure everyone stayed in sync. 2 weeks later, Winton launched. No drama, no blown whistles, just boxes on trucks, orders fulfilled, and clients staying silent because everything ran the way it was supposed to. Thaddeus sent a single-line note. "This is what competence looks like." Blythe sent a longer one about how companies need to stop punishing the people who protect them. RJ circled back a week later with the deeper cut. Greer had pushed emergency vendor contracts at 4 different companies over roughly 5 years. The total damage? About $16 million, $400,000 in padded vendor deals, money funneled through shell structures dressed up as consulting. That wasn't optimization. That was theft with a performance review. But the real revenge wasn't seeing her escorted out. It was watching her entire narrative collapse under plain facts. No shouting, no smoke, just timestamps, signatures, edits, call records. People like her survive on confusion. We stripped it down to timestamps and facts. On Friday after launch, Noemi and I grabbed coffee and eggs at the 24-hour diner near the plant. Grease on the counter, nothing fancy. She asked, "Would you do it again?" I said, "I should have protected them sooner." She shook her head. "You did protect them. You just made it permanent." Driving home, I thought about how close I came to being the weapon Greer needed. But we didn't fold. We proved our worth the hard way. And the next one who tries it, they'll learn real fast. People aren't excess. They're the system. One last thing. Have you ever had someone in charge try to turn you into the clean hands weapon? And did you shut it down, or did you swing the axe and regret it later? If you've got the hype button, tap it to support this video and help it reach more people. Then please subscribe and hit like. It's one click, and it matters a lot. and drop a comment saying, "Good story," or tell me what you would have done.